All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We can allow other folks to continue to join, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar titled Intelligent Wine Pricing. My name is Bob Terzotis. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Mather Economics. First, a few housekeeping items. All attendees will be on mute for the session, but we do want to hear from you. So please feel free to submit your questions through the chat area at the bottom of the screen, and we'll pose them to the panel at the end of the session. After the session, we will be sending out a link to the recording of this event, so please feel free to share that link with anyone on your team who might not have been able to attend. And both Jim and Carol, our panel, have been gracious enough to allow us to include their emails, so they're going to be open to questions after the session as well. And finally, if you have more detailed questions regarding Mather Economics, our D2C tools, our models, and how we support our clients, please feel free to reach out to myself or Matt Lule, who will be happy to set up a call and with you and your team. Let's get started with a quick overview of Mather Economics. We are a data science as a solution consultancy. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. We've been around for about 20 years. We work with more than 200 companies in a variety of industries, including large companies like the New York Times and the NBA, but also with smaller brands in many other industries. We have a team of about 50 data scientists and economists whose purpose it is to help you make data actionable. We would rather have you spend your time and industry knowledge executing on data rather than trying to figure out how to export and clean and prepare and model and evaluate all the data that you have available to you. So one last thing, finally, you might wonder how we got involved in the wine space. So one of our panel members, Jim Moroney, was a client of ours for a number of years in the media space. And when he retired and bought a winery, he reached out to us and asked if we could help him make the data actionable. And here's what we found. We found the wine industry has a ton of great data for our type of modeling. We also found that our models are very accurate in the space. And then we also found that the wine industry might just have the most fun clients that we have. Okay, now I'll turn things over to Matt Lule, the Managing Director of Data Analytics for Mather Economics. He and his team built the tools and provide the consulting for all of our wine clients. Matt?
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. So before we really get into the panel discussion and hear from our experts today, I wanted to just take a couple of minutes and provide a quick high-level overview of some of the services that Mather is providing to the wine industry. Really at the heart of our mission in wine is to make analytics accessible to wineries of all shapes and sizes. We realize that, traditionally analytics and data science has been reserved for in the wine industry for only the largest wineries out there, just due to the cost of employing a full-time analyst or data scientist or economist. And so really what we wanted to do is take our expertise and as consultants and economists and bring a lot of value to the data that we know is floating out there in the different fulfillment and e-commerce systems. So your wine directs, your order ports, your commerce sevens. And when we first started working with our first wineries, we saw a ton of potential in all of that data that was being stored, and spent a couple of years really figuring out how we could add the most value to it so that we could drive revenue and profitability for wineries, not only for the largest ones, but across the entire spectrum of production. So the focus of this webinar is really on pricing optimization work, and we've developed a set of solutions to help wineries with pricing. But we also have a suite of tools based off that same data, really to support the direct consumer channel of wineries. So that's really around, preventing member churn, club member churn, improving retention, and also driving acquisition and reacquisition of your former club members back into the club. And so we have a lot of experience in those types of models and driving value on top of that type of data, the sales and inventory and club member data that's in those systems. We're also adept at keeping score, we like to say. And so we definitely like to track the performance of the recommendations that we're making in partnership with the wineries that we work with. And so we do a lot of A/B testing to track the performance of campaigns and the pricing recommendations that we're making. One of the key value propositions that we have in wine is that really we try to do all of the heavy lifting. And so we want to make sure that, if we're partnering with a winery, that they're not bringing on more work to them. That we're really trying to take a lot of the effort off of the winery itself, so that we can do all the heavy lifting and providing the insights from the data, so that you can focus on doing the stuff that's more important, primarily making great wine. So lastly here, one thing that's sort of central to Mather Economics is that we are a consulting company. And so we're not like some other vendors out there that may just be providing you reporting in a dashboard, and you're sort of left to your own devices. All of our programs come with the consulting expertise that we have in-house. And so we have about 50 economists and data scientists on staff that are going to be working with you along the way on calls to help guide you through the analytics, and also make sure we're collaborating on the things that we're suggesting and finding in the data. So this is a snapshot of our depletion optimization tool. And so the primary use of this tool is to help drive pricing insights for wineries and take a lot of the guesswork out of making some of those pricing decisions. We know that especially for a lot of smaller and mid-sized wineries, making pricing decisions is primarily driven through a couple of things. Sometimes it's by looking around at your competitors and what they're doing and what they're charging for similar types of varietals of wine that they're selling. In some cases, it's really having some sort of standard markup. And in other cases, as we've heard, it's really just a matter of going by your gut. And so our goal with this tool is really to make sure that we can add a lot of analytics and insights from sophisticated types of models that are accessible and taking the guesswork out of those pricing decisions. And so this tool, and you'll see a couple of screenshots from this, for Carol and Jim's wineries as well. But the idea is to really just pull out and visualize the inventory depletion out of those transaction reports and those fulfillment systems, so you can get a sense of how quickly those varietals are selling out historically, and the changes in demand and supply that are impacting that depletion rate. The other thing we do is we estimate econometrically the price sensitivity of each of those wines. And so that's just giving us a sense of, if we were to change the price of that SKU, how much of a change in demand would we expect from that price change? And then we also build into this tool a scenario planning component where you can play around with adjusting the price of the wines that are out in the marketplace, but also future releases of that as well. So all of that really boils down to giving wineries the ability to make really informed decisions about where their pricing should be, not only for the current release, but also for future releases, to plan for differences in production in the future years out from the current. The consultative aspect of what we do, like I mentioned, is really taking the guesswork out. And so we generally turn a lot of the insights from the depletion tool into something that looks like this. And this is where we're working very closely with the winery to come up with pricing recommendations across the entire product portfolio. And so that's getting a sense of the full picture. So how much is being produced next year? How quickly is that current production selling out? What's the current price of the varietal? And given how sensitive to price we think that SKU is through the analytics, but also how much you plan on producing and how different that is from your current production, we can give you a really solid sense of how quickly we expect that to sell out in future years. And based off those goals and what your goals are at the winery, we can make some recommendations on how we can manipulate the depletion rate of your SKUs through pricing in order to match your goals. And just lastly here, another component, like I mentioned, of some of our services, we have a lot of D2C support tools. This is just a snapshot of our churn mitigation dashboard. And the idea behind this is really to give wineries a sense of what is driving churn throughout their membership base, what variables are important in the sales and transactional data that is being stored in those fulfillment systems, and what's the contribution of those types of things to the churn of their club members. So we do a lot of segmentation on top of that data and give wineries the ability to execute campaigns so that they're not just doing the business as usual email blast leading up to the time of allocation releases, but you can be much more hyper targeted in who you're contacting and who you're spending a lot of your extra time and effort and personalization to prevent churn among high value members and also driving new members back into the club. So without further ado, I wanted to loop in Carol and Jim, our experts on the panel today. So I'm just going to do a quick bio for each of them, starting with Carol. So Carol, as many of you know, is the general manager of Denner Vineyards and Winery in Paso Robles, California. She came to the Central Coast of California in 1980 to go to California Polytech. After graduating with a degree in political science, she took a position with electronic data systems in Flint, Michigan. After a year in Michigan, Carol returned to San Luis Obispo and took a position with San Luis Sourdough. Carol moved up to the position of general manager, where she led the company to a production level of over 13 million pounds of bread annually and helped navigate the company through several acquisitions. After 18 years, Carol decided to leave the corporate world to follow her dream of working in a winery. After taking some brand marketing courses at Davis, she found out through mutual friends that Denner was looking for some help. And she was offered a position in 2007 and it has been there ever since. Also, Carol is a member of several numerous business organizations. She enjoys all the benefits of living and working on the Central Coast of California, including running, the great food and wine, and obviously lovely weather. She is married to a retired airline employee, which allows for some great traveling benefits. And as for Jim, Jim is the proprietor of Sixmilebridge Vineyards in Paso. The vineyard was established much more recently in 2013. The first vintage was in 2016, and he opened the tasting room only a couple of years ago in 2020. From 2013 to 2018, Jim served as chairman, president, and CEO of Bilo Corporation, a publicly traded media company. From 2001 to 2018, Jim was publisher and CEO of the Dallas Morning News. And prior to 2001, Jim was president of Bilo's television group, assuming responsibility for stations in 15 markets across the United States. Jim currently serves on the boards of the State Fair of Texas, the advisory board of the College Communications at the University of Texas, and the Bishop's Financial Council of the Diocese of Dallas. In 2004, editor and publisher selected Jim as Publisher of the Year for his accomplishments at the Dallas Morning News. He previously received the Frank W. Mayborn Award from the Texas Daily Newspaper Association for community leadership. And during his time as publisher, which is very impressive, the Dallas Morning News was awarded 3 Pulitzer Prizes. Nice. Jim has a bachelor's degree from Stanford and an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin. In addition to all that, Jim has a wife, Barbara, and has 5 children, Sean, Megan, Kyle, and twins, Callie and Jenny. So to jump into things, Carol and Jim, I really just wanted to start things off by perhaps getting a sense of what the last year has looked like for you guys. You're obviously in some ways very similar wineries, but are in very different stages of your growth. And so I'm curious if we could just start with a recap of 2021 and get a sense of some of the challenges you faced, some of the things that went really well, and perhaps a few things that didn't. Carol, we'll start with you.
Well, 2021 was similar to 2020, where we're all living in a pandemic and not knowing what's going to happen next. Are we going to be shut down? Are we going to have a tasting room open or not? I mean, I think it's been very challenging for the wineries this year due to that. Trying to find, with the supply chain issues, trying to find equipment parts, PPE, COVID tests. I mean, all of us have struggled with that. But besides those struggles, our sales have been tremendous. And I hear the same thing throughout, Paso Robles, is that Paso Robles has really benefited from being kind of out here in the boondocks, so to speak, with how far we are from a large urban area. so I think we've all experienced some high growth, which has been really nice. I mean, our online sales have increased double digits, and our tasting room sales, even though we were closed a few months, have increased. And so it's really been positive business wise, but a little challenging making it through that with all of the COVID and the supply chain issues.
Awesome. Thanks, Carol. Jim, how's your 2020 been? I'm sure some similar components through there. Jim, I think you're on mute.
Always out. Okay. We had a very good 2021, just like dinner did, but for the purposes of this, people on the call, we do about 1,200 cases. We just, as Matt said, our first vintage was 2016, and we were selling mostly the 2017 and some of the 2018 in 2021. We're in that enviable position where we're actually selling all of our wine DTC, and we continued to do that through 2021. In fact, our biggest problem was having enough wine available to keep the tasting room open. So we'll talk a little later about how we asked Mather to help us kind of make that transition. So right now, we're really working on a more of a scarcity issue with the estate wine that we have available to sell, and feel lucky to be here in Paso Robles, which is really seeing, as Carol said, I think an upswing in both the sales for the wine that's coming out of here and also in the number of people visiting. It's a great place to be right now.
Great. Thanks, Jim. So I know you both touched on it a little bit, but really, 2021 has been somewhat of an unprecedented year for a lot of reasons, particularly the rise in consumer prices. Just to touch and frame that a little bit better, in December of 21, the BLS released statistics showing that the CPI was running at its fastest pace in over 20 years, or over 30 years, I should say, since Ronald Reagan was president, with prices growing across the economy at an average pace of about 7%. And so obviously to even build on top of that, there's, things happening with supply chains. And so this is just a graph of trade disruptions and shipping container costs, which have gone up several 100%. And obviously, making wine is a very material, heavy with a lot of input costs and labor costs. And this is just a graph of wage pressure, which has obviously accelerated. The growth in wages has accelerated rapidly post the brief recession that we had at the outset of the pandemic. And so I wanted to get your thoughts. Obviously, these types of pressures are hitting everybody, but wanted to get a sense of how, in particular, they're affecting your winery, and perhaps if you could provide some sense of, how quickly your input prices are growing in Paso, versus some others that may be on the call, and how that's impacting your ability to price wine and have a profitable business with your winery. Maybe Carol, we'll start with you.
Don't get me started on cost. It's been tough. I mean, just like the shipping costs, just shipping wine, our online sales went up 76% last year, but yet UPS and FedEx and the other carriers have increased their their pricing quite a bit. So, you are facing a challenge of where you've seen this increase in business, but you're also having to track the costs of that, and plus keeping staff. I know hospitality has always been hit hardest during the pandemic with all the stresses. And so you're really trying to make sure that you keep those tasting room staff happy and positive and feeling good. So that requires, a lot of communication and a lot of, goals and bonuses and things like that. So yeah, you are feeling the costs increase as well as the sales increase. And it feels like, it's all going pretty fast. It's nice to have data from Mather that we can look at immediately and try to, reconcile those costs with our pricing and make those decisions.
Thanks, Carol.
I just echo what Carol said. I would add that the cost of labor in the vineyards has gone up in 2021 for us pretty substantially in order to keep those good crews here timely when we need them. That was a cost. And then, as you said, keeping people in your tasting room is so important. The cost of turnover is so much greater than so many people or so many companies, I think, realize that, frankly, just it's almost a need to pay them more so that they can earn a livable wage and not be looking for the next, $5, next $1 an hour increase at some other place. So the intangibles, we water, drought, we're still dealing with that. And thankfully we haven't had fires, but that's just luck at this point. It's always going to be a threat. So,
well,
but
the
good.
insurance because of the fires. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a really good point, Jim.
Yeah, because that insurance cost really, really went up. And just so, again, for context here, we make our wine at dinner. So a lot of the costs that might be directly coming to dinner can get passed on to us, but I'm not dealing with them on the front end individually like Carol does in terms of cost in the winery itself, in the production of the wine.
Right. There's definitely no shortage of challenges that you guys are facing. But I guess, switching over to opportunity and perhaps offsetting some of those costs is really around pricing. Obviously, all wineries are focused on pricing right now. And Carol, and Jim, you both mentioned that you have a bit of a good problem on your hands and that you're selling out wine so quickly right now that it presents some unique pricing challenges to you guys. And Carol, I wanted you to touch on a little bit. We were looking over your website recently, and it's actually hard to get our hands on any of your wine right now. So in particular, you're seeing that problem more than most, perhaps. And so, can you just touch on the dynamics of that, and is that all being driven D2C, or are you moving some more wine wholesale, and how are you approaching that from a pricing perspective?
Well, we do 95, 97% DTC, so we're almost completely DTC. And this pandemic has been a little bit challenging in the pricing format, because even though we think we price it accordingly, and we raise the price. Well, when the pandemic first started, all of us were just very, very hesitant to raise prices. We're like, what is going to happen? There's a lot of people that are out of work and people working from home. And how does this all work? And how does this play into our wine club and our DTC business? And we found that, people wanted to reward themselves. I know I did during the pandemic. I was pulling out the good stuff to drink. And we didn't see we saw a huge increase in our sales. And so we were probably a little bit slow on the recommendations that Mather had put in for us, because we felt like with the pandemic, we weren't quite sure. So that's what you see here on our 2019 Cabernet Sauvignon. But if we had raised the price, we would have done a lot better. I think, for us now, we've been through a couple of years of the pandemic, and we're not seeing a slowdown in sales. So we're feeling much more comfortable with raising those prices, and definitely the numbers speak for that.
Carol, are there any particular types of wines that seem to be selling, particularly well and are selling out much faster than some others that you have in your portfolio, or is it really across the board in terms of demand?
Yeah, I would say it's across the board. There are some of our smaller production wines, the Sacred Burrow, the Cabernet is a smaller production wine. So those wines, it's just really hard to get a read on how quickly they're going to go. Our kind of key brand wines, the Ditch Digger, the Dirt Worshipper, and the Mother of Exiles, those are a little bit more easier to get to take that price increase and not see it just, cause a big change for us.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And you touched on the Cab Sauv, which we have an example of, and so just for the folks on the call, this is an example of some of the analytics that we would work with wineries on in terms of getting to the SKU level and how quickly these wines are selling out historically. You can see for Carol's Cab Sauv, she holds back about between 15 and 20% of each of that SKU for library, which is why those curves are bottoming out. But you can see that year over year, those wines are selling out well in advance of their anniversary of their release. And so this was a scenario where the estimated price sensitivity that we had calculated was really low. Given the forecasted production in 2020, which was relatively stable around 5,500 bottles or so, we were expecting that wine to sell out really in about 20 weeks or so, which is very fast. And so what we were able to do is kind of work with Carol and say, what are your goals for extending the depletion of this wine? And so we ended up with a price recommendation of about 10%. And we would forecast that would extend the sellout to around 42 weeks. So still well in advance of a year, but keeping that price within a comfort zone for Carol and her team going into the release in 2022. So you can see what that type of price increase would do in terms of revenue. That's a $54,000 annual impact on top and bottom line revenue, really. And as Carol mentioned, it's one of her smaller production SKUs. So definitely a lot of opportunity there in pricing. I guess, Jim, we'll switch it over to you and get your thoughts really on the same topic. Are you seeing broad-based demand across your production right now across your SKUs, or is it isolated to certain types of red blends that you're producing?
Yeah, Matt, we are. But again, put things in context for people on the call. We're a very new winery. We're doing about 1,200 cases. So this is not a big supply to start with. But I still think, and I know from experience, that you can apply the pricing algorithms of Mather to even smaller wineries like ours, or smaller businesses with smaller amount of inventory, and put it to use. So what Matt has up here is a Zinfandel blend that I think that's what he has up here. Yeah, Zinfandel blend called Paladin. And what we, of course, have been doing is seeing more yield out of our vineyard as the vineyard matures. And because it's a blend, we can actually increase the amount of that by blending it with some of the other Bordeaux varietals that we have planted to increase the volumes. We were seeing sellout of this wine very quickly, frankly, in the tasting room. And again, not having a whole lot of SKUs, we're trying to keep that tasting room open, and we're trying not to release wines until 3 years after their harvest. So what we've got here is the opportunity to do a couple of things. We either can lower the price if we wanted to and try to sell it out faster against the 19 forecast, or we could leave it where it is, or even raise the price, perhaps bring in that, push out that sellout a little bit further. Right now, we're probably going to hold the price where it is. But again, and I think in the next example, if it comes up, I know from experience that if their algorithm says that there is inelasticity in your price and your ability to raise it, you can raise it and it's going to yield pretty darn close the volume and timing of sellout that they give you. This is one where we went to Matt and said, look, we're selling out of our Cabernet Sauvignon, and we need to extend that life to try to get it through till September, when we were going to do our fall release. They came back and told us that if we raise it, I think, to $110 from $80, it would make it pretty much through August. I believed that, and I was confident that would happen, but I was a little concerned about pricing a new wine above $100 that had been priced originally at $80. So we decided to take it up by 20% or $16 and taking it from $80 to $96. And virtually exactly what Mather said happened. We continued to sell it out, but it took a little longer to sell it out, which got us a little closer to our fall release. If I had to do this all over again, I probably would have taken it up to the 110, moved it out all the way to September, and continued to keep a $110 price. Right now, we're at $96, and we're still having a problem with the wine selling out before we can get through September. So we may have a little opportunity to raise the price. I'll quit with this. From working with Mather for more than a decade in another business, but a subscription business like a newspaper with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, if they tell you there is price inelasticity in your wine such that you can raise that price without affecting the amount of wine that's being sold, you're just going to sell it a little bit more slowly. Boy, take them up on it. I mean, if you're selling wine at just an average price of $50 and you took up an average price across your SKUs, $5 a SKU on 1,000 cases, you would drop $60,000 to the bottom line, because that $60,000 of revenue has no cost associated with just a price change. And then you just multiply that up. If you were at 10,000 cases, that'd be $600,000 of profit by just taking your bottles up $5 a bottle across the board. And they can tell you whether it's going to hurt your volume sales or not. So I'm a big believer, and I wish I had as much wine as Carol did.
That's great.
And I remember those days, Jim, and that was the fun. Those were the salad years.
Yeah.
Those were fun.
Yep.
Well, thank you guys for that. And I guess one last question on this pricing piece is, perhaps you guys could shed some light on, obviously we've been working together for a while and forming a partnership with some synergies around, making pricing recommendations together with using data to support those recommendations. But perhaps you guys could shed some light on, how you used to make pricing decisions and how that has changed with some of the data that's you now have at your fingertips, and just the process and how that's changed over time, through our partnership.
For us, I mean, it was all gut hunch. What we thought the market could bear. I did start a spreadsheet. I'll admit to it, and tried to kind of matrix it out, and looking at our production numbers and so forth. And it was just so much work. I mean, to be able to log in and have all your data in there and to be able to look at it has been really positive for me. It saved a lot of time, and also saved the fact that we don't need somebody that's analyzing this data, that I can get on the phone with Mather and kind of discuss it and kind of go through the scenarios and then make a decision. Has been fantastic. And it feels, you are making better decisions because they're data driven and not just gut hunch.
I'd say exactly the same thing, Matt, except we're so much on the front end, and I was so used to working with Mather and had such great success by using them in my previous businesses that we started off kind of right at the beginning using you guys for pricing. And so now we look at every SKU that we have, we get a depletion curve estimated for it at its current price. And then we see whether or not we need to raise that price to push out the depletion curve. If the depletion curve was a long ways out and we wanted to sell the wine faster, we could lower the price and make that happen. And like Matt said, these guys just don't give you a recommendation and then disappear and say good luck. They're with you, the next week or the next phone call. Say, okay, how's it looking? How's the graph looking? Give me an update here. And you got to like that. Your gut is great. Instincts are great. What your competitors are doing is good, but this is unemotional data, and it really can make a difference in your business.
Well, awesome. Thank you guys for that. So just a couple other questions. Definitely want to leave time for folks on the call to ask any questions that they may have while we have you two together. And so the last Silicon Valley Bank survey showed that about 55% of wineries really have no staff dedicated to analyzing consumer data or providing analytics in really any sense. And those that do, about 27% of them is just a part-time employee. So I wanted to get your thoughts, Jim and Carol, just on, the potential that you see for data analytics, obviously with the experience that you have working with Mather and elsewhere so far, but, also perhaps your outlook in the future of, how we can make better use of the data that is being captured, the wealth of data that's being captured through all of the e-commerce platforms and elsewhere, some of the potential for that, and perhaps, what that is freeing up, having us or another analytics provider working on that data, what types of opportunity do you see for freeing up, your own time for doing value add things in the winery? Maybe Jim, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, again, we're a small winery, don't have a large staff. I really, in the business model, adding a full-time person for data analytics would be very, costly on just an overall basis, since we're, again, very small. So being able to outsource this to Mather is, a great cost savings to me, and I'm getting better intelligence and better analysis of that intelligence from the Mather staff than I could possibly get if I hired some person who says they're a data analytic expert and they came in and worked, 24/7 for us. The other part of this is, the more wineries are using Mather, the smarter their algorithms get. It's sort of, taking more and more data and applying more and more machine learning to that data will eventually continue to improve the algorithm. So in a very selfish way, if more people on this call and others, start using Mather, it benefits everybody because it just makes their, as I say, their algorithms smarter. So I would love to see even more people doing this. And for the whole wine industry, it really will improve the margins of the business because when you increase a price, the dollar drops to the bottom line. There's no cost of goods in raising a price, particularly if you're doing it DTC. So I know it's scary if you've never done it this way, and you're thinking, oh boy, God, what if I raise it $10 and nobody buys the wine anymore? Mather can give you what the answer will be and make sure you feel comfortable making that decision.
Yeah, I would echo what Jim said about hiring for this position. I mean, hiring in general is difficult, and finding staff. So anything you can outsource, and especially something as skilled as this, you really you've got the staff at Mather helping you figure out your numbers. And like I said, I mentioned my spreadsheet that I started out with, and this was like, thank you, somebody else doing the data crunching. It's been wonderful. And, this is kind of like big company stuff. I looked at the map and looked at Google's name and everybody else's name that's using, Mather, and we're getting that same skill level, helping us learn how to price our products so that we're most effective. And that just seems like a win-win for me.
Well, thank you guys. That was very insightful. I think just one last question for you guys, and this is really just some closing thoughts. You each have a lot of experience outside of wine, and really a lot of experience in wine as well, with some unique perspectives. And wanted to just close out by perhaps getting your thoughts on this year and your outlook with some of the challenges that we're helping to address, as well as others, and some of the big opportunities that you see in 2022, not only for pricing, but more broadly in the D2C space.
Well, for us, I think, this last 2 years has really increased our online sales, which that had not been such a big part of our sales channels. And so we're really looking at how we can just keep that momentum going. People are more comfortable ordering wine online, and it really speaks to being able to provide the wine throughout the United States versus just here in Paso Robles. So we really want to keep that part of it going. We see that as a big opportunity, and hopefully we'll look at that growth. And then again, with Paso Robles just seemingly on the cusp of really being discovered, we're really excited about all the tourism that's happening here, and hoping that continues to grow and grow. hopefully we'll get our supply chain issues resolved, and and staffing will always be one of those things that you're constantly challenged with. I mean, I think, I'm always looking at ways that we can find to increase the positive work environment here and make it so that people want to stay here and work here, and that they feel like they can develop a career here at Dinner. Those are some of my key thoughts for 2022.
Thanks, Carol.
Matt, we're building up our membership. We're an allocation model, and I think what I'm really looking forward to is having enough of those members with enough data around those members as members of ours to begin to use other things that you all do that I did back when I was dealing with subscribers in the newspaper business, being able to do predictive analysis around who's likely to churn out of my membership, and then intervening with them, trying to make sure we can get them to stay. Which of my lower tier members are most likely to be able to be moved up to my higher tier, like a 6 bottle to 12 bottle, and those kinds of things that Mather does so well. And for me, my only issue now is I've still got a small base of those people, but as I build them up, and one day would love to be where Dinner is with that many wonderful club members, just so much opportunity to really work to retain them, to target the right people to join, and to target the right people to move up in tiers. I look forward to being able to do that. Otherwise, like Carol said, it's great to be in Paso Robles right now. We've got a lot of buzz about this place, a lot of new people coming here to try our wines, and I'm grateful to be in such a collaborative community and a place where people really enjoy making wine and sharing their thoughts with one another.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for those perspectives. Definitely glad that we left a few minutes for questions here. So I'm wondering if Shelley or Bob, if you guys have any questions for our expert panel.
Yeah, Matt, here's a question from Paul. He wanted to know if our analytics models are transferable to the Canadian markets.
Yes, definitely. And so we've really built some file transfer processes to pull data really out of any e-commerce or fulfillment system, and we can absolutely transfer those types of results to Canadian wineries for sure on the direct-to-consumer side.
Great. Carlos asked if we have any pricing tools related to the 3-tier distribution model.
We do actually. So the models that we were just discussing today with Carol and Jim are primarily focused on the D2C side, but we have recently completed some research and development around the wholesale tool as well. And so some of those updates are forthcoming in the first quarter, but we've definitely done some custom analytics on the 3-tier wholesale side as well, and can help you guys out with that as well before that full tool is ready for production.
Okay, here's another question. How long does it take to get the tools actionable?
We usually have a lead time of about 6 weeks from when we gain access to the underlying data to when we can have a full readout of the model results and get all of your data live in the dashboards. And so that's usually about a month and a half. And then from there, we have regular check-in calls scheduled, with Jim and Carol and all of our other wine partners, usually on a cadence that fits your schedule. It makes sense with the cycle of data. Usually that's monthly, but can be more or less frequent depending on your schedule.
How much of the work, or how much do you need from the winery to get them for the data to get to you? Is that a heavy lift on our side?
No, it's actually a very light lift by design. We definitely don't want to add work to your plates. As Jim and Carol were mentioning, we're trying to add value without taking up a lot more of your time. So when we do connect and when we're having conversations, we want that to be providing you the insights so that we can have a conversation around how to use those insights to drive revenue and profitability instead of bogging you down with data requests and things like that. So once we gain access to your underlying data in the e-commerce system, it's really we take care of all of the work. We may have a couple of questions for you just around details of your SKUs or your library program, just to make sure that we're getting the models locked in. But that's really about it.
Do you have any tools that help with production plan?
Yes. So a part of the tool that we have today includes a production planning component where we can visualize the depletion of your SKUs that are released or in the market right now, and the previous usually 4 or 5 years of that SKU history. And then we also have the ability to take your planned production numbers and forecast that depletion out into the future, given the current state of the pricing, but also given the price elasticity estimates that we have. We can tell you, what the expectation for depletion and revenue and sellout dates are, given future production levels that may be much higher, much lower, about the same, but also at different price points. And so a lot of the recommendations we were just chatting through with Jim and Carol were kind of based off those insights from differences in production, especially for Jim, given that, a lot of his SKUs are growing at, let's say 50% a year, which is rather dramatic.
So one last question for Jim and Carol. With their experience in the industry, Jim, not as much as Carol, but you've made decisions in the past with a gut feel and those types of things. But the recommendations that you would get from Mather, have they been helpful to help you decide what not to do as well as what you should do?
That's an interesting question. I don't, from what I see is what I get from Mather is opportunity. I'm not sure I get what path not to take on those. I mean, you could definitely work, I guess, Matt, that's a question for you. You could definitely work the model and see if you went to $225 a bottle and see what would happen. That's probably not what you want to do, but for us, it's all about, the first thing I noticed was a lot of missed opportunity we had with our gut hunch. That's the thing, and just being very hesitant to raise prices when your product is it is in demand that much. That's what I've noticed, is more missed opportunity and what I should have done.
Yeah, I would say that the people on the call that have probably been in business a good long time, like Carol, if you haven't been raising your prices regularly, I think you'll be surprised at how much headroom you have without turning away a lot of your customers and improving your financials overall. I guess if there's something I wouldn't do, it would be just, again, a little bit what Carol alluded to. If I wanted to take a price up, thinking that I could do that and make sure that I continue to sell out all of my wine over the time I wanted to sell it out, and they ran the curve and said, whoa, wait a minute, that price, you're going to probably put the brakes on your sales harder than you want, then I would back off and not do that. And they can always, as Matt said, kind of produce those different depletion curves and keep you from making a mistake that you might have otherwise made without that data.
I will give an example of something that would work with this model. We had rosé available for one full year, 1 year. And I would say that it really did cannibalize the sale of our whites. So if you have a rosé that's $30, $35 and you have a white that's $50, $55, we did notice the sales of the whites were not growing as quickly when we had rosé throughout the year. So, I mean, those are decisions you can make and look at the models. I've asked Matt, can we do sort of a cannibalization model, where, if you increase the price or increase the production of this wine, how would that affect the others? And they are looking at that, I think, right, Matt? But I think those are some of the decisions that you can see that you shouldn't do, to have rosé throughout the year. Those are decisions that we don't want to do anymore. We have our rosé available from April to June, and that's it.
Great. Jennifer asked, do your pricing models take club pricing? I just lost it. Hold on. Take club pricing into account, retail price plus pricing at various club levels.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And so a lot of the modeling we do is based off really the net price that consumers are seeing. So that's a combination of folks paying full retail, for the wine in the tasting room or on the e-commerce site, as well as kind of the built-in demand from your club members that are receiving, anywhere from a 15 to 25% discount due to their club membership. So that is taken into account. All right. Bob, any other questions before we wrap up? I think we're coming to the top of the hour.
No, I think that's covered it.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the folks that attended today. Special thanks to Carol and Jim. Thank you so much for your time today and your expertise, providing your outlook. And thanks again for your partnership as well. If you have any questions about our discussion today, feel free to email Bob or myself, and Carol and Jim have both graciously made their emails available as well. If you have any questions, and we will make this available for folks to review, at your leisure with a glass of wine soon in the future for the next couple of days. So thanks again to everybody, and take care. Have a great week.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.